Hi everyone. I've got some of my catering students in today and tomorrow in very small groups, but we're going to look through the practical element of the NEA, and I thought it would be useful to just kind of share that with you because I've taken quite a long time looking at the spec and looking at the textbook, and so I think that may have not an answer, but kind of a good way of kind of approaching it and kind of thinking about it. So very quickly then, as you know, there's 8 written bits. They're called AAs, assessment objectives, and then there's one practical bit that goes on the end, and that's technically AA3, so assessment objective 3. As you know, with all these bits, you need to get the highest grade in all elements, or you get the lowest, which I know is very harsh, and teachers do not like this bit at all. So what that means in practice, so let's say it doesn't quite work this because you can't get distinction in all the written elements, some are just merit, but let's assume you can. So let's say you got distinction in 7 of the written elements, but for some reason you didn't do very well in 1 because you maybe misunderstood it, and let's say you got a pass 1, then unfortunately you'd get a pass 1. Okay, which seems really harsh. Now added to that is the catering element, or the cooking element rather. So with that, it's exactly the same. So let's say your writing was amazing, but your final practical went a bit wrong, and the teacher really couldn't give you anything higher than say a pass 2, just for example, just because it went a bit wrong, didn't look good, didn't taste good, didn't use a time plan, etc. Then you would get a pass 2. All right, so you need to have in your mind that you need to be hitting the highest band on every single assessment objective, because it will have a massive and possibly devastating effect. So the actual practical there, now my students do on waste not, want not. They are essentially, the briefs are very similar, but just slightly worded differently, but the outcome is the same and the way that you do it is essentially the same. Before you start, if you have started already, but you need to sit down and read the brief at least 4 times, 5 times, so you know what it's saying to you. Lots of the brief is just there to kind of set the scene. A lot of it's irrelevant, to be honest, but what you need to do is highlight some of the key words, and I've done that here, as you can see. So bistro, I would say, as a key word, adults and children, I stress that is really important. We got nutritious and interesting, locally sourced, and seasonal. I've also put, it mentions herbs and salad, and then also we have healthy, and then down the bottom it says there's a little bit of setting the scene that you're a catering assistant, you've got to cook it, etc. But you need to demonstrate 3 skills in prep and 3 skills in cooking. Now that doesn't mean each dish, that means across both dishes. Okay, which, to be honest, you could make a sandwich and a cup of tea and probably, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean, you could probably demonstrate 3 skills in prep and 3 in cooking by doing that. Okay, so what the tasks are then is to propose 4 nutritional dishes. Literally just say, after doing all my, all the NEA, doing all my research, I think the 4 dishes would be 1, 2, 3, 4. You then literally just say, however, after consideration, I've decided to make A and B, so the 2 dishes you've chosen. You then plan for the production of those 2 dishes, so that's the time plan, and you prepare and cook the 2 dishes. Remember, the exam would only need you to present literally 2 plates of food. Okay, so it depends what you're doing. You can do a starter, a main and dessert. You do 2 starters, 2 mains, 2 desserts, a main course and deep starter, whatever, it doesn't matter. But literally 2 plates of food. Now this is where I think you could do this maybe differently than at least I've done it before, is when I was looking at the specification, obviously the key area here is adults and children. That's the obviously, I guess, the people that are going to the waste not, want not bistro. Therefore, your menu must be suitable for those groups of people. Now we know adults and children don't eat the same thing necessarily. So what you need to do, I would suggest, is create a menu that can be is suitable for adults and children, but separately. But because the brief is called waste not, want not, have that in mind as well. There's mention, I don't think I underlined it actually, but there's mention of environmental issues as well, and food miles and food waste. Just on the top here, which I probably should have underlined. Therefore, what we're going to do today with my students is we're going to make this. I'll explain the rationale. So for the adult main course, so I've decided, I've sort of told them more or less, that I want to do 2 main courses. All right, they can decide to do a dessert and or a starter if they wanted to, but it's much easier to show the comparison and that you have read the brief by doing this. Okay, so the adult chicken schnitzel, which is a battered out piece of chicken and breadcrumbs with the risotto. Now the risotto, the stock for the risotto will be made from the carcass of the chicken. So literally one whole chicken, they butcher the chicken, so that's one skill. They would then batter it out, could be another skill. They breadcrumb it, that's another skill. Making risotto, that's another skill. You know, etc., etc. So you've got probably 6 just in the main course, or 6 skills. For the child, using the other chicken breast, chicken nuggets, so basically it's very similar, and chips. Now, we could deep fry the chips, but it does mention healthy. If you bake the chips, then you could say, well, I've decided to bake the chips because it's healthier. So you must remember, always link it back to the brief. Every single thing you do, it must be relevant to the brief. Certainly when you get to AO2 and onwards, it must link to the brief. And lastly, accompaniments. Now, when I went on the course on the very first year that this exam was ever done, or the course was ever done, the lady who ran it said that accompaniments are absolutely key to this. So with chicken nuggets and chips, what would you normally have? I don't know, you might have mayonnaise, then you need to make it. You might have tomato sauce, then you need to make it. With the schnitzel, there's quite a lot going on there, so you might just do a little side salad maybe with that. But if this came out well with the skills, and it looked good, and that's important as well, which your teacher will tell you. The presentation is very important. There's skills for presentation and taste, etc., like food safety, making sure you're hygienic all the way through. But if that came out well, that would be a distinction. And because it has very clearly linked with the brief. Hopefully that was useful, but I will also do in a second video show you how we make these 2 dishes.